Yesterday, the Chinese Communist Party implemented its draconian national security law on Hong Kong in violation of commitments that it made to the Hong Kong people and to the United Kingdom, in a UN-registered treaty, and in contravention of Hong Kongers' human rights and fundamental freedoms. Free Hong Kong was one of the world's most stable, prosperous, and dynamic cities. Now it will be just another communist-run city where its people will be subject to the party elite's whims. It's sad. Indeed, this is already happening. Security forces are already rounding up Hong Kongers for daring to speak and think freely. The rule of law has been eviscerated. And as always, the Chinese Communist Party fears its own people more than anything else. The United States is deeply concerned about the law's sweeping provisions and the safety of everyone living in the territory, including Americans. Article 38 of the new law also purports to apply to offenses committed outside of Hong Kong by non-residents of Hong Kong, and this likely includes Americans. This is outrageous and an affront to all nations. Today, the United States Department of State, along with Treasury, Commerce, and DHS, are issuing a business advisory to companies with supply chain links to entities complicit in forced labor and other human rights abuses in Xinjiang and throughout China. CEOs should read this notice closely and be aware of the reputational, economic, and legal risks of supporting such assaults on human dignity. I want to call attention to recent credible and deeply disturbing new reports that the Chinese Communist Party is imposing forced sterilization and abortions on Uyghurs and other minorities in Western China. This shocking news is, sadly, consistent with the CCP's decades-long callous disregard for the sanctity of human life. I call on all nations, women's advocates, religious groups, and human rights organizations to stand up for the Chinese people's basic human dignity. Look, the Chinese Communist Party's brutality affects the rest of the world too. We welcome India's ban on certain mobile apps that can serve as an appendages of the CCP's surveillance state. India's clean app approach will boost India's sovereignty. It will also boost India's integrity and national security, as the Indian government itself has stated. Today, Canada's National Day celebrations are dimmed by the CCP's recent decision to bring trumped-up espionage charges against Michael Korvig and Michael Spavor. The CCP's propagandists have implied that these two Canadian citizens are hostages held in retaliation for Canada's lawful arrest of Huawei's executive. She is charged by the Department of Justice with bank fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit bank and wire fraud. I commend the Canadian government for standing firm and backing their independent legal system. Hostage-taking for political gains puts China in league with the Irans and Venezuelas of the world. The two Mikes need to come home now.
What I think we should do is not launch a new Cold War against them. What I think we should do is work with our allies, Australia, Canada, the United States, Europe, Japan, all of which have denounced what's happening in Hong Kong, an extraordinary degree of concerted horror at what's happening. I think we should work with them and make clear that when China behaves reasonably, that's fine, and we'll work with them. When they behave badly, we'll call them out. When they behave badly, there will be consequences, as there have to be. Otherwise, the 21st century is going to become increasingly unstable, increasingly less prosperous, and increasingly dangerous.
Beijing's so-called national security passed on the eve of the 23rd anniversary of the handover of Hong Kong from the UK to China signals the death of the one country, two systems principle. The purpose of this law is to frighten, intimidate, and suppress the people of Hong Kong who are peacefully demanding the freedoms they have long been owed. All freedom-loving people must come together to condemn the law, which accelerates Beijing's years-long assault on Hong Kong's political and economic freedoms.
Round up and arrest pro-democracy activists and hold them in indefinite detention like they do on the mainland, and maybe forever, and that's my main concern, my most immediate concern. But I think we need to watch very carefully what happens next, particularly against groups and individuals who I'm pretty sure the Chinese government will target to make an example of in the early days after the passage of that bill.
Well, this is a continuing effort by China to have a strong grip on Hong Kong, to undermine its autonomy, which has been so successful, and to exert its influences and its views on the people of Hong Kong. So I'm deeply concerned. This is something that I have been saying was moving in this direction, and now this latest action makes it even all the more alarming. That's why, the legislation that we've offered here, I think, is critically necessary to move forward.
Last question. What's your message to people in Hong Kong who feel disappointed or worried about their future after the...
My message is we stand with you. Overwhelmingly, the United States Congress stands with you. People across the world stand with you. And so continue to stand up for democracy and your rights.
I think, obviously, the idea that they would have two systems, that's gone by the wayside. It is a single monolithic authoritarian system where people are denied their basic human rights, freedom of speech, freedom of association, something that the people of Hong Kong had been able to enjoy. And that's obviously a very ominous development, and one that I think you'll see additional responses by Congress in terms of sanctions to try to convince the Chinese Communist Party that the cost is too high. They need to reconsider.
Well, we've very carefully now assessed the contents of this national security legislation since it was published last night. It constitutes a clear violation of the autonomy of Hong Kong and a direct threat to the freedoms of its people, and therefore I'm afraid to say it is a clear and serious violation of the joint declaration, the treaty between the United Kingdom and China. We will honour our commitments to the B&Os, and I'm going to set out further details, including what action we'll take with our international partners in the House of Commons shortly. We fought very hard and we negotiated with the Chinese back in the 1980s to have the freedom for peaceful protest and freedom of expression to be respected. China, through this national security legislation, is not living up to its promises to the people of Hong Kong. We will live up to our promises.
And it's not a national security law, it's a crackdown on Hong Kong and on the liberties of the people of Hong Kong. And I hope that this will not be the case, but I worry that it will be, that this will be an excuse for Beijing to start rounding up pro-democracy leaders. And heck, any citizen of that city who dares say anything that does not perfectly fit with and kowtow to the authoritarian regime in Beijing. So this is it's a sad day. It's also a call to action by the United States. We've got to be very vigilant. I'm glad that the Senate was able to pass finally unanimously our resolution condemning what's going on in Hong Kong, my resolution condemning what's going on in Hong Kong. We're able also to pass new sanctions that Senator Toomey, Senator Van Hollen spearheaded, which I support. And I hope the administration will use all of those tools and send a clear message that we'll wait and see how this now gets implemented. We don't really have a choice now that they passed it, but we're going to be watching the implementation closely. And if this becomes a rounding up of democracy advocates and a shutting down of any kind of free speech in Hong Kong, freedom of assembly, freedom of worship, we're going to need to use all available means, sanctions, diplomatic tools at our disposal. And I hope this will be an occasion for free nations to stand together and to say that we're going to speak out, we're going to use the tools at our disposal, and we're going to be even more vigilant when it comes to Beijing's attempt to expand its power in the Indo-Pacific region and around the world. Because Hong Kong is just first step on the agenda. What they really want to do is expand their power, including their coercive power over speech, into this country, into countries around the world, and they ultimately want to make themselves the dominant power, and that simply is not acceptable for the security of the United States.
What's your message to Hong Kong people who
stand strong? I just think that the people of Hong Kong, their courage and their fighting spirit has inspired the free world over the last year, and I would just urge them to stand strong during this time and to know that the free world is with them.
It severely penalizes democracy activists, and even terms like collusion are outlined in the new law, and it defines that any contact with external actors like human rights organizations, journalists, members of Congress, those great people like Joshua Wong and others who have come here and said, all this we're asking Xi Jinping is for freedom. That's it. and to live up to your own promises made in the basic law and in the joint communique between Hong Kong and China, which facilitated the transfer, the conveyance of Hong Kong to China. They have broken their word. You know, words matter, and it is a matter of international law that they committed for at least 50 years to having these two Chinas, two systems, one China. And now they're breaking it with impunity.
This is a battle between democracy and dictatorship, between liberty and tyranny, and between freedom and oppression. And it is a battle that the world must win. And I'd like to take this opportunity to speak directly to the people of Hong Kong. America stands with you, and America will always support you. Last year, when we heard you sing our national anthem, and when we saw you carrying our American flag, we knew and we know that you were telling us we are not two people but one, both united in our belief in freedom and democracy for all.